Hello, cooking enthusiasts. This week's video is another update on my pizza making journey. Not that long ago, I posted a video about fried pizza, and in that video, I included a nice beginner's pizza dough recipe. Now, I do love fried pizza, and in many ways, I think it's a more achievable type of pizza compared to trying to replicate some of the effects of a proper pizza oven. But it also does have its limitations, so I'm always going to try and push the boundaries and attempt a pretty standard baked pizza as well. Several months ago, I had some pretty good success using a large cast iron frying pan in a maximum temperature oven, and small but pretty good pizzas came out of that. I will be honest, this time around, the baking did not go quite as well. It was pretty much the same oven setup I had this time, but for whatever reason, it was not working as well. But despite those setbacks, there were some pretty big breakthroughs, especially around the pizza dough. I managed to create a very pleasant, workable dough with a pretty decent increase in hydration compared to my standard dough, and I was using completely sourdough starter as my source of leavening. The basic recipe for this dough was 700 grams of total flour. I believe I did a mix of all-purpose and bread flour, 500 grams of water, roughly 150 grams of sourdough starter, and 14 grams of sea salt. The exact amount of starter isn't known because I did an initial dose of 100 grams when I was first incorporating the dough, and then I eyeballed a little extra. With that sourdough starter, we are pushing close to 72-75% hydration for this dough, which isn't ridiculous, but is still relatively high. Basic pizza dough procedure: incorporate all of the ingredients very roughly except for the salt. Let it rest for 30 to 45 minutes, and then add the salt and knead it relatively vigorously until the texture looks correct. It got about 8 hours at room temperature for bulk fermentation, and then my dad divided it into 6 portions. 4 of them were around 180 grams, and 2 more at 150. Those rested in the fridge overnight and then were taken out in the morning to do several more hours at a relatively low room temperature. As you'll see in the actual pizza baking footage, I think I definitely need to let this style of dough ferment for at least 2 days. The first pizza we did was actually a combination that I use a lot. Some type of pesto, some type of apple, and some type of salty pork. This time it was a dried herb pesto using oregano and fennel from my grandmother's garden, olive oil, garlic, pecorino, a little bit of pumpkin seeds, and a little bit of frozen peas, just to give it a little bit of body. Definitely a combination I want to try again and tweak a little bit. The thinly sliced apples were on top before baking, and then the shredded prosciutto was going on after baking. As I have sometimes seen with natural fermentation versus using commercial yeast, you can get some very unpredictable and uneven air pockets. At the very least, I know my starter is active and producing CO2, but I do think I need to work harder to prepare and balance my sourdough starter before using it for pizza next time. Even after we decided to call the pizza cooked, it was pretty pale, and I think that's partially due to too much acidity in the dough. It did not taste aggressively sour, but a lower pH does inhibit browning somewhat. And again, further fermentation will help that, but I think I had too much bacterial activity versus yeast. The second pizza was really exciting as well. Very basic tomato sauce, pepperoni, and then my homemade processed pecorino and black pepper cheese. The processed pecorino is something I made a video about a long time ago, and using it on a pizza is inspired by St. Louis style pizza. Using something that contains stabilizers on top of a pizza has some really interesting results because it melts so easily. It almost becomes its own sauce, but also still browns on top. At this point, we were encountering some technical difficulties with the baking. We needed to use more cornmeal because the dough was wetter. And then, at some point, the cornmeal inside the cast iron inside the oven caught fire. Because of all the commotion of the fire, we did stop filming, but we did actually bake one more pizza, but in my slightly worse downstairs oven. So much more of a focaccia-esque grandma pie, thicker dough and baked at a relatively lower temperature for a while, but the actual toppings are probably my favorite so far. It was the aforementioned dried herb pumpkin seed pesto, a little bit of low moisture mozzarella, cherry tomatoes, and then after baking, we topped it with tartar. This was actually a seared lamb tartar, so lamb chops seared very hard and fast to get some browning on the outside, but still totally raw in the middle, and then chopped up by hand. and then I dressed it very simply with olive oil, pepper, and a little bit of fermented plums I had made. Since I thought of the idea, I have actually seen it done before, but if you are someone who likes tartar, I really recommend it. This specific combination worked very well, but any combination of a slightly chilled, salty, savory tartar on top of a warm, soft pizza dough is really amazing. The next day, we also made some calzones, and with the extra fermentation, I think the dough was browning and generally behaving a little bit better. Because of the fire issue we had, I may go back to either fried pizza or stick more to a slightly more reasonable temperature grandma style. But either way, I definitely have some ideas for improving my sourdough pizza for the next time around. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you can, please check out the first link in the video description. I have a fermentation related Kickstarter going on. Feel free to ask any questions about this pizza or sourdough in general. Otherwise, thank you for watching.